Professor Ayman.
Yes.
Please talk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are really glad and privileged to have Professor David Bloom with us today in this keynote lecture in the second day of our conference. Professor David Bloom, he's the chair of the Department of Global Health and Population at the Harvard University of Harvard. He is a visiting professor in FAC faculty, Harvard Business School. His PhD is in the field of economics and demography from Princeton University in 1981. He has a lot of research and experience, both in teaching, research, and practice in the field, in the demography in general, public health, and in the geriatric age group. We are privileged to have him today to talk about the vaccination, value and finance, and the implications for Egypt. It's, of course, in the era of COVID-19, with the row all over the world about the availability, the cost, the effectiveness, and the safety. It's the proper time, or it is the golden moment for us to listen to his experience, especially with this implication on Egypt and Egyptian society. Professor Bloom, kindly start.
Thank you for those kind words, Professor Salah, and good day to you and to all the distinguished ladies and gentlemen online. I'm honored to be here with you in this little corner of cyberspace, and grateful to Ain Shams University President Matini for inviting me to be part of the 9th Annual International Ain Shams Congress. The last time I traveled internationally was in February 2020. On that occasion, I made my way to Cairo to discuss the value of vaccination, and that's also the topic that I plan to discuss in this session. I've divided my remarks into three parts. First, I'll discuss the value of vaccination in general terms. Second, I'll discuss a specific case of relevance to Egypt, namely the value of pediatric vaccination against pneumococcal disease. And third, I'll discuss mechanisms that Egypt can use to finance the introduction of a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine into its national immunization program. The central point that I'll make in this session is that Egypt has within its reach a very real opportunity to take a significant step toward achieving its strongest and most compelling national aspirations. I'm speaking here about the desire of Egyptian stakeholders to improve population health and to achieve universal health care and the goals of Vision 2030. I'm going to argue that Egypt can take a giant step forward by adopting a high-impact instrument of childhood disease prevention, in particular, and as I've mentioned, a conjugate pneumococcal vaccine. During this session, I'll argue that adopting such a vaccine will not only promote population health, but also promote social and economic well-being and yield considerable surplus benefits that can help finance other social initiatives as well. If we can do, I think we've advanced the slides. I just want to be on the cover slide still. Slide 1, please. Thank you. So I'm very grateful to the conference organizers for giving me this opportunity. My gratitude is grounded in research on the value of vaccination that I've read or been involved in conducting for nearly 2 decades now. Next slide, please. I want to disclose at the outset that my research on the value of vaccination has been generously funded by multiple private and public funders, including Pfizer, GSK, Sanofi, Merck, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Wellcome Trust. This research indicates that vaccination has, among other health interventions, been substantially undervalued throughout the world. It's been undervalued because academics and policymakers alike have generally failed to recognize and take proper account of the full health, economic, and social benefits that vaccination confers. And that blind spot has led to underinvestment in both vaccine development and vaccination coverage. Such underinvestment has been to the peril of populations throughout the world, but especially to the peril of people living in low-income countries and in middle-income countries like Egypt. I think we've advanced too far. I think if we can just go back a slide still. Please. That's good. Thank you. Reforming the health ecosystem so that vaccinations are, in general, properly valued and appropriately utilized will ultimately involve everything from rationalization and reform of institutions and practices for vaccine regulation, to advances in the way we conceptualize and operationalize health technology assessment, to increasing investments in vaccine development, testing, and delivery. These are complex tasks that require a wide range, I would say, of expertise and experience, and they're blending with some serious political and financial muscle. The truth is that vaccines can be expensive and may sometimes seem outside the range of affordability. But I hope to convince you all in this session that standard approaches to financial engineering can mitigate affordability concerns and facilitate countries and people capturing the full societal value offered by vaccines. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do now is to start by discussing what I mean by the value of vaccination. And here I'll point to three sets of issues that are fundamental to undertaking meaningful assessments of value. The first is perspective, the second is sources of value, and the third is metrics. Next slide, please. Thank you. Perspective refers to the stakeholder or stakeholders whose interests we're using to assess value. For example, are we looking through the eyes of vaccine developers, manufacturers, and distributors, through the eyes of health ministers or finance ministers, through the eyes of vaccine recipients and their families, through the eyes of employers, public and private donors, or are we looking through the eyes of society as a whole? Next slide, please. Sources of value refer to the dominant interests that are associated with each perspective. So for vaccine manufacturers, value naturally includes the risk-adjusted surplus of revenue above cost. For health ministers, it includes population health and healthcare spending. For finance and planning ministers, it includes public revenues and expenditures and the distribution of economic well-being. For individuals and families, it includes the intrinsic and the instrumental values of better health. And for society as a whole, it would include most of the benefits that I've already noted, net of the value associated with any opportunities foregone due to spending on vaccination. It would also include the value assigned to any changes in social equity and political stability that may be associated with falls in the incidence and severity of vaccine-preventable diseases. Next slide, please. Now we have metrics. Metrics are what we use to measure value and set priorities among alternative uses of funds. And these need to have a clear and logical connection to the elements of perspective and sources of value. For vaccine manufacturers, a key metric is the commercial return on investment. For health ministers, a primary metric is incremental cost effectiveness. For finance ministers, metrics include fiscal balance and macroeconomic performance. And for society as a whole, a natural metric is a social benefit cost ratio that is reflective of a broad range of health, economic, and social benefits attributable to spending on vaccine development and coverage. Next slide, please. I'd like to quickly share a small subset of the ways in which health economists around the world have been failing us for decades by giving short shrift to the full societal benefits of vaccines. Conventional cost-effectiveness analyses, which is what health economists have mainly delivered to us, they basically capture direct health benefits and averted medical care costs due to vaccination. But today, we understand that these are but a fraction of the full societal benefits that follow from vaccination. First, in terms of the health benefits associated with vaccines, traditional health-centric cost-effectiveness analyses commonly neglect vaccine-caused reductions in the pace at which antimicrobial resistance develops. And that's due to both vaccines' prevention of resistant infections and to reductions in both the appropriate and inappropriate consumption of antibiotics. Antimicrobial resistance is a large, dark cloud hanging over humanity, and the value of vaccines in addressing that threat needs proper consideration and measurement. Traditional cost-effectiveness analyses also neglect preservation of the microbiome associated with reduced consumption of antibiotics. In addition, those analyses neglect reductions in health conditions that are comorbid with the conditions that are directly caused by the target pathogen that's prevented by, whose infection is prevented by a vaccine. And most surprisingly, cost-effectiveness analyses sometimes also neglect herd effects. And herd effects, as I'm sure everyone knows, has now become a common household term throughout the world, thanks to COVID. Those are some of the neglected health benefits of vaccines. I would point out here as well that routine, health-centric, cost-effectiveness analyses also typically neglect a slew of vaccinations' economic benefits. The list includes higher returns to education due to healthier kids having improved school attendance, higher educational attainment, and better cognitive function and focus. Also neglected are increases in labor force participation, hours worked, productivity, and adult earnings, including the additional income people generate when they're healthy enough to work and don't have to care for ailing family members. And that's not to mention the increased value of non-market time in various productive activities involving family and community, especially among older people. Finally, traditional health-centric cost-effectiveness analyses often leave out important social benefits. And here I would simply draw everyone's attention to the improvements in social equity that typically result from the fact that the benefits of vaccines often accrue disproportionately to poor people who live under crowded conditions, and also to disadvantaged racial and ethnic minorities and vulnerable groups like women and children who may lack access to health care. As you can see from this discussion, vaccination programs offer a whole host of benefits that standard cost-effectiveness analysis tends to wholly or partly neglect. And this can lead to an inefficient allocation of social resources, also known as bad decisions. The idea here is that taking account of full societal benefits is consequential not just in theory, but potentially in practice and likely in practice as well. Suppose, for example, that a public authority decides that a vaccine does not create enough value to merit investment. But suppose also that this authority considered only a narrow swath of the vaccine's full societal benefits. We can't be sure that their negative decision is a good one. Perhaps the vaccine would have demonstrated high value for money had the authority focused on its full benefits. Now, I can tell you that with few exceptions, studies of the full societal value of vaccination point to rates of return that vary from attractive to absolutely eye-popping. I'm speaking of rates of return that easily surpass standard hurdle rates for health investments, and that even surpass the return on investment in basic education for girls. And that's important because basic education for girls occupies an exalted place in most of our minds and the world's treatises as an instrument of economic growth, development, and improvements in well-being. Next slide, please. The observations that diseases have wide-ranging impacts on society and that vaccine technologies offer benefits that far exceed just improving people's health and reducing medical bills should be familiar to all of us. Indeed, the fact that this conference is being held via Zoom rather than in person and face-to-face is a powerful testament to the wide-ranging impacts of diseases and the value of their prevention. Our lives have been ruled for the past year plus by the threat and the devastating impact of COVID-19. This has truly been a global catastrophe, and Egypt has felt major effects too, ranging from school, workplace, and mosque closings to the drying up of tourist flows and spending. COVID-19 provides self-evident proof of the negative effects of health risks on income and schooling, of the fear of visiting medical providers, of the anxiety surrounding health risks, of the importance of infection dynamics, herd effects, and comorbidities, and of the social and economic inequities in risks of infection and access to quality health care. The world now understands the enormous health, social, and economic value COVID-19 vaccines will safeguard, even more so in the face of the highly transmissible and more lethal variants of COVID-19 that are now circulating. And the proof of this point about the full societal value of vaccines is not limited to what will hopefully be a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. The Egyptian government, as I'm sure most or all of you know, has undertaken a massive program to eliminate hepatitis C in its midst. Just over 5 years ago, Egypt had the highest hepatitis C prevalence in the world, but the widespread and government-sponsored treatment and prevention of the disease is a tremendous success story today. Of course, this has not been inexpensive. In fact, it's estimated that the screening and treatment program cost over $200 million from 2018 to 20. But the investment was a wise and beneficial one. Over 50 million Egyptians were screened and were, when appropriate, treated for hepatitis C. And that's resulted in an order of magnitude drop in the nationwide prevalence of hepatitis C and has made Egypt truly a model for the world. But as we all know, there are multiple threats to population health. And what I'd like to do now is to switch gears to focus on a different health issue, one that's been a long-standing and significant thorn in Egypt's side. Next slide, please. The health issue that I'd like to focus on now is pneumococcal disease. This disease, which actually is a collection of diseases, is caused by a bacterial infection to which children and older people are particularly susceptible. It's the leading cause of death of children under age 5 globally, and sadly, Egypt has not managed to escape its grip. For example, approximately 11% of deaths of children under 5 in Egypt are caused by pneumococcal disease. Pneumococcal infection causes conditions like pneumonia, meningitis, septicemia, and inner ear infection, and can result in a wide range of long-term physical and cognitive sequelae. Fortunately, the world now has at its disposal vaccines for preventing pediatric pneumococcal infection. These vaccines are so effective that the WHO insists that pediatric pneumococcal vaccines are essential, not a luxury for inclusion when it comes to inclusion in countries' national immunization programs. For Gavi-eligible countries, these vaccines have been a component of Gavi support for over 10 years. It distresses me to report that Egypt has not adopted a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine in its national immunization program. It distresses me because that means that Egypt is not one of the 160 countries around the world that have adopted a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine. Egypt is also not among the 15 countries that have either adopted or plan to adopt a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine in the Middle East, among the 18 countries in the Middle East and North Africa. That means that Egyptian children and others are experiencing a significant level of vaccine-preventable pneumococcus-related morbidity and mortality. As an economist, what makes me most distressed is that pneumococcal vaccines tend to be extremely cost-effective and to produce outsized societal returns because of the considerable benefits they confer in terms of people's health, education, labor participation, productivity, income, peace of mind, and so forth. Next slide, please. Next one further. Thank you. Even among its peers in the Middle East and North Africa, Egypt is an outlier when it comes to pneumococcal vaccination, as I've just indicated. As of 2015, and you can see that in this slide, 10 of the 18 countries in the MENA region had adopted a pneumococcal vaccine into their national immunization programs. Egypt is one of the 8 that hadn't, and its pneumococcal incidence rates reflect that. Every country that had a pneumococcal vaccine in 2015 in its programs had lower incidence rates than Egypt. And I find that to be compelling real-world evidence that pneumococcal vaccination causes appreciable declines in pneumococcal disease prevalence. And I can also point out that since 2015, 5 countries have adopted or plan to adopt pneumococcal vaccination. Notably, that list of 5 countries includes all 4 countries that had higher pneumococcal incidence rates than Egypt in 2015. And that means that Egypt is now one of only 3 countries in the MENA region not to have a pneumococcal vaccine in their national immunization program, placing it alongside Syria and Iran. And of the 3, Egypt, Syria, and Iran, Egypt has the highest pneumococcal incidence rate as of 2015. My point here is that Egypt is bucking the global and the regional norm with regard to pneumococcal vaccination, and it's doing so at a cost to population health in Egypt and also at great economic cost. The economic cost is apparent from cost-effectiveness analyses that my colleagues and I have conducted. These analyses indicate that pediatric pneumococcal vaccines would be either highly or extremely cost-effective if introduced in Egypt. The analyses we've conducted also reveal absolutely eye-popping rates of return to spending on pneumococcal vaccination. I'm talking here about estimated rates of return that are in excess of the returns to investments in girls' education, which, as I mentioned earlier, most development economists think of as representing the high end of the yield scale. Our estimates of the return on investment in pneumococcal vaccination are in fact actually conservative, which means that the true returns that Egypt is likely to realize would likely blow the socks off most and perhaps all alternative uses of public funds in Egypt. There is, however, a stumbling block in all of this. The stumbling block has to do with the fact that high returns are necessary for an investment to be advisable, but are not sufficient to implement it. Implementation requires funds that many cash-strapped countries simply do not have readily available. Put another way, high returns don't guarantee affordability. And that brings me to the third portion of my remarks, which has to do with financing the introduction of pneumococcal vaccines. Next slide, please. And one further, please. In general, sorry, one slide further, and one more. Yes, thank you. In general terms, there are 5 sources of public funds that can be used to expand a national immunization program. The first source is funds allocated to other purposes that have, for some reason, gone unspent and can be repurposed. Based on work that some colleagues and I have done in the Philippines, Nepal, and Mongolia, the existence of such funds is more common than one might normally think. Philanthropic donations are a second source of funds. I'm thinking here of funds from religious communities and from organizations like the Wellcome Trust, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a large number of bilateral and multilateral agencies. Tax revenues are a third source of funds for expanding a national vaccination program. The fourth source of funds I draw to your attention involves crowding out low return or underperforming health programs and crowding out low return or underperforming non-health programs. And the fifth and final source of funds involves the issuance of government debt, typically in the form of multi-year bonds. Next slide, please. Of these 5 sources of funds, I find debt quite appealing. It's appealing because of the fact that debt allows close alignment of the time pattern of a vaccination program's costs and benefits. In other words, the benefits of a vaccination program are realized over time, as we've discussed, and that can be made to line up well with the costs when those costs are paid over time also in the form of interest payments on a bond. Perhaps the most familiar debt instrument we have is a traditional sovereign debt bond, and that instrument is quite straightforward. Basically, the government borrows money at the beginning and then pays it back with interest over time. It's this feature of debt that allows the government to align their costs and benefits. Rather than requiring a large upfront cost by the government, debt can be structured so that the government doesn't pay a large sum at the beginning and instead backloads the cost to coincide with the benefits of the vaccination program. Those benefits are small at the outset, as I've said, but become larger and larger as more and more cohorts are vaccinated over time and as the vaccinated children reach school and working ages. To make this a little bit more concrete, let's suppose, for example, that the Egyptian government needs $100 million to vaccinate its 2.5 million childbirth cohort with a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine. If the government borrows that $100 million and agrees to pay a 6% interest rate, it only needs to pay $6 million in the first year, and it can spread the rest of the cost out over time using the increasing and accumulating benefits of the vaccination program to pay the remaining costs. One other virtue I'd mention here of debt instruments, and next slide, please. One other virtue I'd mention about debt instruments is that they can be structured in different ways, providing different money for results incentives to keep public and private stakeholders. Innovative debt instruments, such as, for example, the Social Impact Bond, or SIB, offer great flexibility. A SIB is referred to as an outcomes-based instrument because the interest payments are conditional on the success of program outcomes. My colleagues and I think of a SIB almost like an insurance policy for the government, which is why governments sensitive to program failure may prefer it. On the other hand, investors take on a lot of interest with SIBs in the sense that if the program fails, they may not get any returns at all. Anyway, let me be clear here. There are many different ways debt can be structured, and the cost and benefits depend on how much effort is put into vaccinating each cohort and the particular vaccine being used. But we've noticed a key advantage of using debt to fund immunization programs, insofar as the cost of the program can be reduced until the benefits are more fully realized. The issue of vaccine program affordability is not so much about whether the benefits arrive, but when they arrive in relation to when the program has to be paid. Bond finance is a well-established and clever way to alleviate the natural wariness governments have or may have about the alignment over time of costs and benefits. And I would note here also that Egyptian policymakers have already shown their willingness to utilize innovative financing mechanisms with their issuance of the first green bond in the MENA region just last year. Let me now switch gears one final time and take a final minute or minute and a half to summarize the key points that I've sought to make in this session. First, I would urge health technology assessment bodies in Egypt and beyond to embrace broad perspectives for evaluating, comparing, and deciding on alternative interventions. This is especially pertinent when public monies are substantially used to finance the interventions. In such situations, it makes eminently good scientific, financial, and common sense to know and compare those public costs to the corresponding value of the full public benefits that may be expected to follow from them. Second, I would urge Egypt's policymakers to seriously consider adding a pediatric pneumococcal vaccine to its national immunization program. Taking this step will promote and protect the health of Egypt's people through direct protection of children, through herd protection for older people, and through indirect protection for all Egyptians through reduced rates of antimicrobial resistance, nosocomial infection, and related comorbidities, and also via greater peace of mind. In addition to Egypt enjoying the intrinsic value of these health benefits, Egypt will also enjoy considerable instrumental value associated with the contribution of better health to education, productivity, public finance, the realization of Vision 2030, and so forth. The second recommendation is closely aligned with WHO recommendations and the experience of 160 other countries, including most countries in the Middle East and North Africa. In addition, rigorous analysis for Egypt, which my colleagues and I have conducted as consultants to Pfizer, shows that the adoption of pneumococcal vaccines are somewhere between highly and extremely cost-effective and conservatively offer returns on investment that are quite substantial by any conventional standard. Finally, I would urge that Egyptian policymakers not allow themselves to be paralyzed by current fiscal stresses or victimized by a preconception that additional vaccines are not affordable. Debt mechanisms, which have very flexible designs, are a natural way to reduce risk and push vaccination costs into the future so they align more closely with vaccination benefits. I think we all understand that vaccination programs are costly to do. What I am saying in this session is that in many cases, including the case of pediatric pneumococcal vaccination in Egypt, vaccination programs are far more costly not to do, and especially when viewed through the lens of full societal benefit. Egypt would do well to avail itself of the considerable value within its reach by introducing a pneumococcal vaccine into its national immunization program. Next slide, please. I'll close now, and I'll close simply by thanking you all, and also by acknowledging many of the terrific set of colleagues you see on this slide that I've had the pleasure of working with on the ideas I've covered in this session. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Salah.
Thank you very much, Professor Bloom, for this really enjoyable, informative lecture. And you made it through this, through the model or the example of the pneumococcal vaccine. You made it very clear how vaccines should be evaluated beyond the traditional cost effectiveness. And to me, it was also very impressive to know that the most promising parameter that we should include in all our cost effectiveness, the promoting girl education as the top of the list of parameters that improve the economy and should be involved in our cost effectiveness. If there is any question or comment from I see Dr. Meteni is with us, Dr. Magdi Tawfiq. If anyone would like to comment or ask, I keep a small question at the end, but if anyone would like to comment or ask Professor Bloom. Okay, so it seems that everything is clear and impressive. Okay. Something that might look out of the mainstream of the lecture, but I would like to ask you, would it make any change, positive or negative, if the vaccine is produced in Egypt? For example, the pneumococcal vaccine, would it alter the equation, or no, it won't alter the equation positively or negatively?
Assuming the vaccine is produced to the same high standards and has the properties and safety and efficacy profile as the ones that I've been talking about that we studied, it won't make a difference to the calculations I refer to. It might make a difference to the local economy, though. That's always something worth considering, but that's sort of beyond the scope of what I'm able to comment on.
The reason I'm asking, for example, there is the experience in India, the Serum India Center, where they promoted vaccine propagation of vaccine programs through their own serum. They call it Serum Indian Center. Probably you are aware of that. So that's why I'm asking this question: whether producing it, of course, with the same quality control, would this maybe on the other hand, maybe you tell me that this will alter the equation to the negative. That's to say, maybe this would add further cost to the equation.
I think it would add potentially further value to Egypt by creating jobs through technology transfer and so forth. It certainly has done that in India. The Serum Institute of India is actually the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world. At the moment, they're heavily engaged in producing many vaccines, including COVID-19 vaccines. But the fact that it's localized is, I would say, a benefit to the economy of India. It's worth considering to be sure that Egypt has the capacity and the interest to introduce sort of local manufacturing plants as well.
Any other questions or comments from the audience or Dr. Meteni?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Meteni is with us, Dr. Bloom. He finished his meeting and is online with us now.
I'm so sorry for being late. Thank you very much, Professor Bloom, for the wonderful talk. I suppose I missed actually the first half of it at least, so I'm sorry. But I noticed in your conclusion that you're stressing a lot on the pneumococcal vaccine as to be mandatory within our armamentarium for vaccine for the Egyptian pediatric age and for the 2.5 million newly born every year. Of course, this is very much appreciated, but I imagine that you can consider the huge financial impact needed for this. And I rapidly picked up your solutions that you propose, which all of them are very valid and worth considering, of course. And I think we will put this in our consideration from now on. But I want to go back to the COVID-19 and the vaccination of the COVID-19. I don't know if you covered it or not, because maybe I'm again sorry that I missed part of your talk. And COVID-19 and the available, the 4 available vaccines, 3 from the United States, 1 from England. And I don't know if you mentioned about the Russian and the Chinese, which we cannot ignore in the market nowadays. So if you can elaborate a little bit on the Chinese and the Russian vaccine, that I know that they have an issue with the West and it's not approved, at least in the United States and maybe in Europe as well, for the time being. And what's the prospect in the near future for them? and the availability problem. If we are going, all of us, to stick to the American vaccine or the AstraZeneca one, we have an availability. It's not only a price, it's an availability problem worldwide. So for our part of the world, what's your insight about that? So I think we need a few words about COVID-19 vaccination and the current situation.
So thank you, Professor Mattini. I appreciate the question. I think you're asking one of the most fundamental and central questions of the day in terms of the different COVID-19 vaccines. I would start by saying that the different vaccines have different properties in terms of efficacy, in terms of side effects, in terms of number of doses required, in terms of cost. And all of the principles that I referred to earlier are applicable to assessing the different vaccines, comparing the Russian vaccine, the Chinese vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, as well as the AstraZeneca vaccine, and there are others that are coming as well. I think the issue of cost effectiveness is absolutely self-evident here, as is the high rate of return. And I referred to COVID-19. I did refer to COVID-19 earlier because I think all of the principles of vaccine assessment that we've learned because of COVID-19 apply equally and must apply equally to pneumococcal vaccines and other vaccines elsewhere in the world. I think at this point, I think vaccines are basically viewed as the exit strategy from the grip of the pandemic. And the vaccines in the U.S., many people have been immunized, and I think the plan is that by the end of May, the entire population that wants to be immunized should have access to it. That's not the case in other countries, and that's I think it's a difficult situation. But I'm hoping that vaccine manufacturers will ramp up production, will deliver vaccines. I know that COVAX is making a great effort to do this. The Serum Institute of India is also doing a lot of that. Dr. Sala mentioned before, is doing a lot of vaccine production and making vaccines available. And I would urge the government of India to negotiate access to as many vaccine doses as possible, as quickly as possible, to protect the population, because the cost effectiveness of those vaccines is enormous and the return on investment is going to be even higher.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, and thank you also for inviting me to participate in this session.
Thank you very much. But there is comparing the pneumococcal vaccine in a context where there is no pandemic for the pneumococcal vaccine, or whatever vaccine we mentioned, is totally different than the current situation. We're now, of course, it's very cost effective to vaccinate everybody on Earth against the COVID-19 if possible. But my question is, in the United States, up to my knowledge, that 100 million, at least 100 million Americans have been vaccinated. That is 30% of the Americans. Now, is that figure right, or you surpassed that?
I think it's on that order at this point. I haven't seen the latest numbers, but so it's a substantial fraction.
We imagine that at this point of time, in the United States of America, thirds of the Americans have been vaccinated, and the other 2/3 will be vaccinated by the end of May, which is very good. But what about the daily number of cases of new infection and of deaths? My personal follow for the data coming from the States, at least from the media, that it's not decreasing, the daily number of cases and the daily fatalities as well. Maybe decreasing a little bit, but it's not going hand in hand with the number of increase of vaccinated Americans. Do you agree on this, or do you think it's a misperception?
There has definitely been a decrease in the numbers of daily cases in recent weeks. Some of that is due to social distancing and wearing masks, and some of it seems to be due to vaccination in the U.S. And it doesn't happen as a straight line. It happens in a very nonlinear way, that when you actually reach more than 2/3 or 70 or 80% of the population is vaccinated, then all of a sudden it starts to fall very dramatically, numbers of cases. I would say also that the medical community in the US has learned better how to treat people that have COVID-19 infection. So conditional on being infected, you have the survival prospects are better at this point as well. And yes, the COVID-19 pandemic is different than pneumococcal disease, but pneumococcal disease is the leading cause of child death, under 5 children dying in the world, and it's a leading cause in Egypt as well. And COVID-19 we've had for a year, but pneumococcal disease we have year after year after year, and there's something that we can do about it. And my main point here is that, yes, I understand that it's costly to do something about it, but what I'm trying to argue is it's much more costly to neglect it and not to do something about it. We have within our reach very effective vaccines that can address this problem in Egypt. And I think it's going to, and there's something in it for the health ministry and the population of Egypt. There's also something in it for the planning ministry, the finance ministry as well. And I think it will be a great benefit to Egypt, and it will actually help Egypt generate enough surplus benefits to move it along in the path towards universal health coverage and the realization of Vision 2030.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer and for your elaboration. And I leave Professor Saleh to end the session.
Okay. If there's no further comments or questions, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Bloom. And by the way, Professor Miteni, Professor Bloom has generously offered to help or to cooperate with Ain Shams University to promote the concept of health economics, whether among undergraduate or postgraduate, and to cooperate with any society, I mean scientific society relevant to Ain Shams, to promote this concept and this science. And I'm going to contact him later on to arrange for this. I'd like to thank him very much for this initiative and thank him for his time and effort to share with us his knowledge and experience in the field of vaccination and its economic impact. Thank you, Professor Bloom, and thank you all of you for attending this session.
If I may jump in and thank again Professor Bloom for his wonderful talk. And if I may take from your words, Ayman, we need Professor Bloom to stick to Ain Shams and not to the societies. Let's start by Ain Shams.
Okay, so we would like to have you mainly with Ain Shams.
We want to get the maximum out of him because he hasn't got time for everybody. So please, Professor Bloom, stick to Ain Shams.
I would thank you for that. I'd be absolutely honored to do it. And I'm also very happy to host faculty and students from Ain Shams at Harvard University. So we can think about a full exchange program.
We'll do that. With pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Professor Magdi?
Yes.
Yes, we are ready for the keynote lecture. Professor Pamela, you are with us?
Yes.
Okay, Professor Magdi, please start.
Okay, we have the honor and the privilege to introduce Professor Pamela Obiumon, the Dean of Roy Perry College of Engineering, Prairie View University, Texas University System. She has been as a dean for this faculty since September 1st, 2018. Obion was selected as a department head of one of the largest departments of the college, the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, in 2013. Under her leadership, the department was awarded about $18 million in grants from Chancellor Research Initiative of the Texas University System. The grants aided to establishment of 3 centers: the Computational Biological and Bioengineering Research Center, Cybersecurity Research Center, and Center for Advancing Innovations in Smart Microgrid. Dr. Obiumon research interests are in the area of integrated microsystems for environmental sensing powered by smart systems using field programmable gate arrays and the design of FPGA-based controller for autonomous vehicles. She has published over 52 papers in referred journal and international conference, and she supervised about 21 master and PhD candidates. Please, we appreciate, of course, your joining us today in this conference. And now we all will be glad to listen to your lecture. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conference. Again, I'm Pamela Bierman. I'm the Dean of the Roy G. Perry College of Engineering at Prairie View A&M University. So the topic that I will be speaking on is disruptive technologies. And one of the reasons why I decided to present this is because we are pursuing a MOU with your university with hopes that we could possibly exchange students or conduct research and collaborate. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things that we're doing on our campus, as well as some of the things that we should expect in the future. So with that being said, I will start my slides. So I'll start out talking about disruptive technologies and then how we are preparing our students for the future. So basically, when I say that a technology is disruptive, it actually means that the technology will significantly alter the way that consumers operate or businesses operate. Here's an example. Web-based video, Netflix, basically disrupted video stores. They basically went out of business when this technology came on board, and right now it's a disruption for cable. Another example is Uber. Uber disrupted the traditional taxi cab industry. So we have a few technologies that are really disrupting everything, and it's changing the norms of our society. And so the six that I'm going to focus on are basically ones that we focus on at Prairie View A&M University, but there are actually 13 that really most of the literature talks about. But the six that I'll focus on is artificial intelligence, 3D printing, 5G, the Internet of Things, virtual augmented reality, automation and robotics, and blockchain. So of course, you all are familiar with artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's already a big part of our lives. If you pay attention to the web, of course, you see the chat box. You're familiar with Google Home and Apple Siri. Even artificial intelligence, it's able to give us our preferences. It looks at our activities and behaviors and tell us, make predictions. I know, for example, for me, when I'm going to work, my car basically tells me, you have 26 miles for work. On Sundays, when I get in the car, it knows that I am getting ready to go to church. So it watches us, and artificial intelligence basically look at our activities and can predict. Of course, Google is building an algorithm that enables AI to learn to drive in a way that's similar to humans. But even given all of this, we still have not reached the full potential of artificial intelligence. We still have a long way to go. So it's going to be around for a long time, especially because we're rolling out 5G currently. And then, of course, robotics and automation is changing. So there's so much more for AI in that area. In 2020, last year, there was a breakthrough in conversational AI where the artificial intelligence systems were able to understand regular language and basically generate language. So that's going to spur more investment. So that is definitely a feature that will definitely be up and coming in the future. Also, AI processors. This year, there was a market of about $5 billion for artificial intelligence processors. And the projection is that that market will be at about $22 billion in the year of 2025. So this is definitely an area that you would want, and we want our students to get engaged in and be invested in. Also, as a part of AI, we're focusing on deep learning, the computing platform for artificial intelligence. Of course, there's a market of $30 trillion in the next 20 to 15 years. So of course, you know, we must invest, and our students must invest, our faculty and universities must invest in this area. One of the biggest areas that we see deep learning being used today is with smart speakers. Last year, actually 2019, there were about 100 billion voice commands using smart speakers. In 2020, there was a 75% increase. So that is definitely a feature. Of course, self-driving cars. Here in the US, we have the Waymo's autonomous vehicle that's driven over 20 million miles, including through cities of San Francisco, Detroit, Phoenix, all different areas. So deep learning is very, very important in that area as well. And we're all familiar with TikTok. And we know that now TikTok has outgrown Snapchat and Pinterest combined. But part of that is because of suggestions of videos and recommendations that are being made using the deep learning software platform. So that is one of the areas we want to focus on for our students. It's a disruptive area. The other disruptive area is 3D printing. Of course, 3D printing has been around for a long time. It's been around since the 1980s, but it has just recently become very disruptive to the manufacturing industry. The picture on your right is the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. And on that rocket, they 3D printed many parts of that rocket because they were able to create superior parts with superior strength. So 3D printing is really a big part of our lives now, even with NASA on the space station. They're using 3D printing to replace any parts that are broken. One of the biggest areas that you will see investment in the next 10 years is in the area of body parts. Right, currently, in the year of 2025, it's projected that $120 billion will be spent in this area in 3D printing and additive manufacturing. And so bioprinting is really in its infancy. So there's so much more in that area, and we will see a lot more. The Dutch, they basically have built a metal bridge using 3D printing. And of course, a company in China has built an entire home. There's the capability right now of building homes that cost $2,000 and more using 3D printing. But this particular home, they were able to build it to where it would last for 150 years. It could withstand any type of earthquake for the most part. And they were able to construct it in 15 days. So we know that 3D printing will be around for a while, and it's an investment that we should have for our students, and our students should get engaged in that area in engineering units. The other area is 5G. 5G is very, very promising. It's 5 times faster than the 4G capabilities. Well, when we moved from 3G to 4G, because of the speed that we were able to build using that capability, we were able to build apps like Uber and Airbnb. These were disruptive technologies because, of course, again, Uber changed the entire taxi industry, and Airbnb impacted the entire hotel industry. So these are very disruptive to the operations that we have now. So with 5G, it's going to bring so many more strengths and so many more new, I guess you could say, disruptive activities, but in particular, self-driving cars. It will enhance that, as well as IoT, the smart cities, using the Internet of Things with sensors and all kinds of devices. And then The other biggest disruptive technology is the Internet of Things. Now that's old, the Internet of Things, because now it's called the Internet of Everything. And the potential for this area, it is projected that it will be $11.1 trillion industry by 2025. And I didn't say a billion, I said trillion. So our students and our young engineers and industries have to get engaged and be involved in this type of, in this area. So IoT is what is going to help us make the transition into our smart cities. The next area is augmented reality. Of course, we're already using that in some areas of education, and the projected use is more into navigation. They're suggesting that it will replace some of your GPS systems. It's used in advertising, communications, and it's used a lot in training. A lot of the companies, I know one company is really focusing on it, and that's the helicopter company. They're training people on how to fix their machinery using 100% augmented and virtual reality. It's here to stay for the next 10 years. The other disruptive technology is blockchain. And blockchain was developed through Bitcoin, and it is already disrupting the banking sector. It's enabling people to be able to share resources, as resources such as your cars. You know, it's impacting the car rental industry. Now people can plan and share cars as they travel from one area to another using this blockchain technology. And according to the Gartner company, it is projected to generate as much as $1.55 trillion by the year of 2025. So getting engaged and engaging our students and having them to learn about this technology is very, very important. One of the things that rolled out last year, UPS rolled out its first drone airline, and blockchain was the technology that they used to maintain and also to be able to keep up with the various drones or to track the drones. So blockchain is here to stay, and it is worth us engaging. Of course, automation and robotics. Robotics is in every aspect, everything that we look at in terms of manufacturing, self-driving. One of the biggest areas now is medicine. It is a disruptive force. It's much cheaper than human beings. So of course, you will see people lose jobs, or people will have to develop new skills. And in particular, they're stating that over 120 workers worldwide will need to be retrained over the next few years because of robots and AI. So this is another area that we should keep our students engaged in and try to remain on the cutting edge in engineering. So I listed 7 disruptive technologies. The next question that I ask myself is, how do you prepare students for a workforce that's for the future? These will be jobs that are really not defined yet. We don't really know what those jobs are, but we know they're coming. And we know many of them are here, and people are exploring and in a learning mode right now. So as we look at some of our experiences and some of the things that we're planning to do at our university and in the universities that we collaborate with, is we're trying to ensure that our students have good fundamental skills. We're trying to ensure that they have the hard skills in engineering, and then they have a good exposure to software architecture, coding, algorithms, data structures, data analysis, lots of data science, as well as machine architecture and design. Those are fundamental basic courses that we try to ensure that most of our engineers get exposed to, as well as we place a strong emphasis on lifelong learning, because in particular in our undergraduate program, as well as our graduate, master's and PhD programs, because this knowledge becomes obsolete so quick. These disruptive technologies are growing exponentially. They're changing almost by the day. So the students have to learn to stay continuously informed on the upgrades in those technologies. And then we try to nurture creativity by giving even our undergraduates more open-ended, complex problems so that they can build on their critical thinking skills and learn to solve a lot of problems using some of the technologies that are available. We also, over the last, I would say, 5 years, we have tried to prepare for this disruption in these types of technologies. So what we've begun to do at Prairie View A&M University in the College of Engineering, we started hiring top faculty or people in this area, people who had expertise in AI and the Internet of Things and virtual reality and data science and machine learning. And so we were pretty lucky to get several good faculty who were in this cutting edge before many of the other universities really started focusing on it. So we also started establishing research centers in this area, and I'll tell you a little bit more on the slides to come, and developing new courses to integrate these disruptive technologies there into our curriculum. We launched graduate programs, we launched graduate certificates, and we established credential or certificate programs. And then this last 2 years, we've been trying to build our relationship with our industry partners who are strong in these areas. We also encourage our students as well as our faculty to take advantage of the online courses and credentialing. Of course, you've probably heard of Coursera. That's a $1 billion company now, and a lot of industry have invested in that. And so there's lots of credentialing and lots of courses that you can take where you can cover and learn more about these disruptive technologies. And also we try to have our students take advantage of internships. So the specific things that we've done at the Roy G. Perry College of Engineering is we have hired stellar faculty. We hired faculty in the area of 3D printing who does advanced manufacturing. We hired them about 3 years ago. And we've strengthened our corporate relationships. We have strong relationships with companies like IBM, who's doing quite a bit of work in quantum computing and AI. Intel, of course, Google. We've strengthened our relationships with those companies. We established a cybersecurity concentration because with all of this IoT and 5G and cloud computing, cyber is a very big issue. So we know that that will also be around for a very long time. And so we're ensuring that our curriculum has a cybersecurity concentration. We completely revamped our electrical and computer engineering curriculum. You know, we consider this the fourth industrial revolution. The previous third revolution was the internet and computers. But these disruptive technologies, they even require different platforms, different types of computing. Even with quantum computing, everything will be new, even the hardware that you use to use those computers. So we're revamping our curriculum so that our students will get exposed to some of the cutting edge. Although we still do hold and teach a lot of the fundamentals that we did previously. And we've also established a certificate program in data science. We've established a certificate program in engineering leadership. The program in engineering leadership requires our undergraduate students to receive digital badges from companies And they also have to attend lectures and a lot of series from companies and listen, because right now, these technologies are not taught at universities. And so in order for our students to engage and learn, they're learning from industry and also from research centers, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We established a certificate in project management because collaboration is very important. But one of the key things that we've done is we established a relationship with IBM where they do quite a bit of credentialing and giving digital badges in this area. So for the most part, we train our students on areas such as design thinking, AI, blockchain, and cybersecurity. And then they go to IBM and take exams, and they can obtain digital badges and become certified in that area. Some of the other things that we're proposing, we're starting a new degree now in cybersecurity. We're proposing a new data analytics concentration in our computer science department. And also in our computer science department, we're proposing an undergraduate certification program in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. We're also trying to bring in courses in quantum computing and the Internet of Things. We hired faculty who are experts in the area of the Internet of Things. So we're ready to start teaching courses in that area. And also, in order to nurture creativity and for our students to focus on open-ended projects, we've launched a new Intel Innovation Center. And in that center, we basically give students, it's a maker space for the most part. And we use a lot of chips and a lot of devices from Intel, and we give our students open-ended problems, or we work with the Intel company, and we look at some of their business challenges and give those challenges to our students to work on to keep them engaged. So again, our goal is to close the gap as our students transition to the workplace. And so we continue with our internships. We've added more industry partners to our advisory boards. And we've started a series of tech talks on our campus. They're bi-weekly talks. And we also have asked our business partners to support our graduate students. You know, for a long time, we focused on graduate assistantships and TAs and things of that nature. But now we're really asking our business partners to support our PhDs and master's students so that they can get more exposed to some of the cutting edge tools that are being used in industry. For the most part, we've asked industry to partner more with our research centers and our faculty. So we've invested over the last 5 years, $35 million into research centers in these areas. We actually won a grant for the Center of Excellence in Research and Education and Big Military Data Intelligence. And for the most part, that's our AI lab. We invested $5 million into that center. We also established the Center of Excellence in Cybersecurity. We made an investment of $5 million into that center as well. We established another center, the Smart Microgrid Advanced Research Center, and that was another $5 million that we invested in that center. We also invested another $5 million for the Computational Systems Biology Center. One of the hottest areas, I didn't speak on it, but it is one of the 13 disruptive technologies, is in the bio and bioinformatics. So we felt that that was an investment that we made. And of course, we also won a proposal. We invested $3 million in the combustion in microgravity, because we know that space is an area where the future is as well. So, and there's also funds invested in energy and sustainability. That lab over last year, I think we received $5 million in a grant to build that lab too. So we're continually building our labs. We established a graduate certification program in deep learning and artificial intelligence. Once we hired our faculty who were experts in that area, and that's our faculty who also run the first center, the Center of Excellence in Education and Big Military Data Intelligence. They established 18 hours at the graduate level in the areas of deep learning and artificial intelligence. So once our students complete their PhD or their master's, they're able to take a few additional classes to become even more experts in this area so that they can be prepared for industry. We also have established a certification program within a smart grid where they talk about energy and things of that nature, making the power grid smarter using artificial intelligence and IoT and even cloud computing. So this is where we are. So we know that one of the things that the focus of the future is with these areas, multidisciplinary research is very important. And so we've invested, we have a new $70 million research building being built. And it's a multidisciplinary building where we'll work with other colleges. And in that college, we'll continue to build our research. Some of the labs that we have in our new building is, of course, we have our basic teaching labs. But on the third floor, we're still focusing on this cutting edge research. So on the third floor, we have labs for machine learning. We have CAD and virtual reality lab. We have an advanced manufacturing lab. We have the UAV lab and the robotics lab. We have a clean room and microelectronics lab. And you can notice on the right, we have quite a bit in the bio. So we focused on all of the areas that are for the future. Again, we still focus on the basic fundamentals, but in order to be prepared for this future economy or this fourth revolution, we are putting things in place. And it has paid big dividends. We're a small university. Our university has about 9,000 total students. We have about 1,400 students in the College of Engineering, 85 faculty, about 300 graduate students. But our students participated in a National Navy Research Artificial Intelligence Sea Tracking Challenge. And the part of that challenge was for them to go out and to track various ships in the ocean and not be detected using AI. And in the US, students from the West Coast and East Coast participated, universities. We beat 31 universities. Many of those universities were top tier research universities and Ivy League schools. And our unit, our Prairie View University, won first place. So we're very excited about what we're doing at our university. And one of the things, and again, the reason why I am here as a keynote speaker is because we're interested in establishing a relationship with your university and also work with your students. We have a lot of international faculty, in particular, international students in our graduate program. We have about 51% of our students in our graduate programs are international students. So I've been working closely with Dr. Shakur, and we currently have an MOU that's being routed and signed by our president at our university, and I believe we'll be coming back to your university shortly. So this is what we have in a nutshell. And that's my last slide, so I will take that off and take any questions if you have questions. Okay. Well,
We thank you, Professor Pamela, for this valuable lecture, and you're joining our 9th annual Insurance University International Conference. And if anybody had a question, please raise your hand. As you know, Professor Pamela, we have a joint memorandum, signed memorandum between university and the Insurance University. And I hope some of our PhD or master candidates can join your lab and your program to train in this field. It is very interesting field, and I think we have to do some joint work between your program and our lab here in Insurance University. We thank you again for joining us.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. And bye-bye.
Welcome. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.